Hello everyone, welcome to Sawan Sir's class. As you all know, we are discussing various topics which are prescribed for English literature students who are studying in Rashtrasanta Tukadoji Maharaj Nagpur University, Nagpur. We are basically dealing with the topics which are given in the book, a background to the study of English literature. And this book has been prescribed for Nagpur University English literature students. So they are studying this book in their English literature subject for semester 1, semester 2, semester 3, semester 4, semester 5 and semester 6 classes. Today, we are dealing with the topic which is given for study in semester 5 section, and the topic is types, kinds, division, forms, classification of tragedy. So as we all know, we are learning various topics related with the background to the study of English literature. And in semester 1 and semester 2, we have studied about poetry. In semester 3 and semester 4, we have studied about prose section. And for semester 5 and semester 6, the drama section from this book has been given for the study. And when we are going to learn the various dramatic type, the first dramatic type that we are going to learn today is tragedy. So topic of today's class is types, kinds, division, forms, and classification of tragedy. So when we think about what are the types of tragedy, what are the kinds of tragedy, what are the divisions of tragedy, before that, we have to understand what tragedy means. Tragedy is a drama, or tragedy is a kind of play, kind of drama which deals with the darker side of life. Tragedy is a drama which deals with the sad or the unhappy side of life, or rather we can say that the drama which ends at the sad note can be called as tragedy. This tragedy can be divided by two types. It can be divided according to the form or structure. It can be divided according to the theme. According to the form and structure, tragedy is further divided under subtypes. The first one is the classical tragedy. Second one is the romantic tragedy. According to the theme, tragedy is further divided under four subtypes. The first one is the heroic tragedy. Second one is the horror tragedy. Third one is the she tragedy, or fourth one is the domestic tragedy. Or rather, we can say that the first one is the horror tragedy. Second one is the heroic tragedy. Third one is the she tragedy, and fourth one is the domestic tragedy. So, as I have told you that tragedy can be divided according to two types. It can be divided according to form or according to structure. It can be divided, it can be classified according to the theme. According to the form or structure, tragedy is further divided under two subtypes. The first one is the classical tragedy and second one is the romantic tragedy. According to the theme, tragedy is further divided under four subtypes. The first one is horror tragedy, second one is heroic tragedy, third one is she tragedy, and fourth one is the domestic tragedy. So one by one, now we will learn what are these subtypes of the tragedy. When I say that tragedy is divided according to the form and structure as a classical tragedy and romantic tragedy. So first of all, we have to understand what the classical tragedy means. What are the various, what we can say, features of the classical tragedy? We can say that the classical tragedy is based on the rules and conventions which are laid down by the great Greek masters, or rather we can say that the tragedy which follows the rules and conventions which are laid down by Aristotle and other great Greek masters, that type of tragedy is called as the classical tragedy. So now question may arise in your mind that what are these rules, what are these conventions? To make it easy, we can say that the tragedy which follows observance of three unities, or rather the tragedy which what we can say written according to the observance of three unities, or rather the tragedy which employs chorus into it, we can say that that type of drama, that type of tragedy is the classical one. So now what are these three unities, means how they are followed, or what is the theory of the unities? We can say that the three unities, the first one is the unity of time, second one is unity of action, third one is the unity of place. So this theory of unity is based on the passages in the writings of Aristotle, and he has wrote about these unities in his famous book Poetics. So the theory of poetics is, theory of unities is noticeable in Aristotle's book Poetics. What does Aristotle speak about these unities? So basically, Aristotle speaks about only two unities. He speaks about unity of time and unity of action. The third one, unity of place, is implied itself in the unity of time. So one by one, now we will know that we will what we can say, try to understand that what are these three unities, what does each unity says. So the first one, unity of time. So when Aristotle writes about unity of time, he suggests that, or he says that tragedy must confine itself to the single revolution of sun. So whenever a dramatist is going to write his tragedy, whenever he is choosing the plot for writing the tragedy, whenever he is developing that particular plot, it is said that he should make the choice of the plot. He should make the choice of the story which can be shown within the within the 3 to 4 hours time span. Means he has to present that particular drama on the stage. People will come to see that particular drama, and they will come to see for 3 to 4 hours, or rather 5 years. So he should present a story, present a plot in the form of a tragedy, which can be concluded, which can be what we can say included within that particular span of time. So that's why as the earth takes 365 days to complete its revolution around the sun, so whatever the incidents those are spread over that time, that should be included. If at all the dramatist will include the incidents or events which are spreading over the what we can say 10 years or 15 years or 20 years of time span, at that time it will not be possible for that particular dramatist to include all those events and present that plot, present that story within the speculated time period of the 3 to 4 hours. That's why the time required by the plot should not be more than 3 to 4 hours. And while writing that particular drama or the tragedy, the dramatist should take into account that whatever the story he is presenting in the form of the tragedy, that should be presented in such a manner that that drama can be presented in speculated period of time. Events exceeding to many years would appear unreal and illogical, and this thing should be taken into account while developing the plot of the tragedy. Then second unity is unity of action. What does Aristotle say in this unity? He says that plot of the play should be either purely comic or purely tragic. It should not be the blend of two. It should not be the mixture of the two. Means if at all the dramatist is going to write the tragedy, then the plot of the play should be completely tragic one, completely sad one. No comic action should be included in the plot. Secondly, he says that there should not be the blend of the tragic and the comic action. And thirdly, he says that no subplot which is unconnected with the main plot should be introduced into the drama. It is very obvious that whenever some story has been developed by the writer in the form of tragedy, in the form of comedy, he will first of all create the main plot, and to support his story, to support the main plot, he will obviously create many subplots. But at the same time, he should take care that no subplot which is not connected with the main plot should not be introduced by him into the story. That will disturb the main plot. So that's why no subplot unconnected to main plot should be introduced. At the same time, the action of the play should be purely comic or purely tragic. There should not be mixture of the tragic and comic action into the same drama. Okay. Next unity is unity of place. As I have already told you that unity of place is not separately written by Aristotle in Poetics. The unity of place is itself implied into the unity of time. What he says in unity of place? Unity of place says that, as we can say, that plot of the play should remain honest with one single place. Whenever the writer is going to write his drama, he will choose his plot, he will choose he will what we can say write or creates his own character, and then he will put those characters on a settings. He will create some city or place or some village, and then on that particular place, in that particular city or village, that story will run, that drama what we can say will take place. So whenever he is creating that place, at that time he should take care that he should not make frequent changes into the place. For example, if at all some scene into some act is taking place into Ramtek or taking place into Nagpur, then next scene, so the first, if at all first scene takes place in Nagpur, the second scene should not go to Delhi or Calcutta or Mumbai or Pune. So there should not be many changes. It should, what we can say, happen in and around Nagpur. And that's why unity of place says that there should be no frequent changes in place while presenting, while creating the settings, while creating the place of the drama. And these are the three unities. And if at all some tragedy follows unity of time, follows unity of action, follows unity of place, we can say that it is a classical kind of tragedy. Another important thing for the sake of classical tragedy is that it uses or it employs the chorus. So what does chorus means? We can say that chorus is the integral part, very necessary part, very important part of the classical tragedy. And this chorus has been used by classical dramatists, classical tragedy writers for three purposes. Which were those three purposes? The first purpose of using the chorus is that it reports the events those have already happened in the play. It may happen that from certain point or from certain incident, the dramatist may start his what we can say tragedy or the drama, and before that starting point, it may happen that some historical events might have been happened, some kind of incident might have been happened. To report the incidents, to report the events which were happened already, those events were reported with the help of the chorus. That was the first use. The second use of the chorus was that it gives the narration of those events which are not possible to be presented on the stage. For example, during those days, dramatic activity was not that much developed. The scenes of flood, scenes of fire, scenes of what we can say bloodshed, scenes of violence, scenes of big battles. It was very difficult to show all those scenes on the stage. That's why whatever the scenes which are not possible to be shown on the stage, those scenes, those events were reported in the form of the chorus. At the same time, the classical people or the classical dramatist or the what we can say, they people believe that there should not be presentation of the violent physical action on the stage. To avoid those violent physical actions, those actions were reported in the form of the chorus. Third important use of chorus was that it deepens the moral teaching of the play. In those days, dramatists believes that the drama should give some kind of moral message with the help of entertainment. So when the people got entertained, when that people, what we can say, sees that or enjoys that particular drama, at the same time, he should get some moral teaching. And that kind of moral teaching has been deepened with the help of the chorus. And chorus sees that, or chorus, what we can say, tries to deepen that moral lesson or the moral teaching and sends the audience home with the firm belief in God. And we can say that this particular kind of drama, by using various classical rules, Greek masters have produced immortal plays. And in English also, in what we can say, in England also, many nice plays were created, were written by using this particular form of tragedy. And the best example is Samson Agonist by John Milton. So I can say that these are the two types of tragedy according to the form or structure. The first one is the classical tragedy, and then second one, now we are moving to the second type of tragedy according to the form. Second type of tragedy according to the form or structure is the romantic tragedy. So now you have to take into consideration that whatever the rules we have seen for the sake of classical tragedy, whatever the conventions we have seen for the sake of classical tragedy, just reverse them and you will get what are the, what we can say, things which romantic tragedy follows. Or rather, I can say that romantic tragedy does not follow any set pattern. It has no any set pattern. It freely violates the rules and norms which are laid down by the Aristotle and other great Greek masters. At the same time, it freely violates three unities. It does not follow the theory of unity. It does not follow unity of time. It does not follow unity of place. It does not follow unity of action. At the same time, plot of the romantic tragedy is the fine blend of tragic and the comic action. Then it presents, means classical tragedy says that there should not be presentation of violent physical actions on the stage. But in romantic tragedy, you will find that the many violent physical actions have been presented on the stage. At the same time, the dramatist of romantic tragedy says that they are writing their play, they are writing their tragedy according to the popular taste of audience. They are writing for the sake of audience and not for the sake of Greeks. And we can say that Shakespeare is then ever shining name in the field of romantic tragedy. Means all the tragedies which were created by William Shakespeare, those are created by using the form of the romantic tragedy. And before him, this particular kind of form was made popular by Marlowe. And the famous example of this kind of tragedy is Dr. Faustus, which is written by Christopher Marlowe. And all the tragedies which are written by William Shakespeare are categorized under the type of the romantic tragedy. So according to the form and structure, I can say that two types of tragedies are there. The first one is the classical tragedy and second one is the romantic tragedy. Now we will move on to what are the types of tragedy according to the theme. So we can say that according to the theme, the tragedy is further divided under four subtypes. The first one is the horror tragedy, second one is the heroic tragedy, third one is the she tragedy, fourth one is the domestic tragedy. One by one we will see all these four subtypes of the tragedy according to the theme or according to the subject matter. So according to the theme, the first type of tragedy is horror tragedy. The horror tragedy is based on the scenes of violence. So rather we can say that the tragedy which is filled with the scenes of violence, murder, cruelty, butchery, many bloodshed, revenge, everything is there, and we can see that all the stage has been covered with the blood and scenes of violence. That type of tragedy is created. That type of tragedy is called as the horror tragedy. And when audience witness such kind of drama, such kind of play, such kind of tragedy, they got horrified, and that's why the feeling of horror is created in their mind or in their heart. And that's why this type of drama, this type of tragedy is called as horror tragedy. And this type of tragedy was initiated in England by John Webster and Ford. And the best example of this particular kind of drama is Duchess of Malfi, written by John Webster. Then next type of tragedy, according to the theme or subject, is the heroic tragedy. As the name implies, the tragedy which is based on the exploits of some great hero, which is based on the workings of some great hero, or whatever the exploits, whatever the great works done by that particular hero, and based on that particular story or particular incidents or events of that hero's life, if some dramatist creates a tragedy, writes a drama, that type of drama is called as the heroic tragedy. And this kind of play has been made popular into English by Dryden and Otway, and it deals with the exploits of some great hero. And the famous example of this particular kind of drama is Aurangzeb, written by Dryden. The third type of tragedy, according to the theme, is she tragedy. Once again, I can say that as the name implies, she tragedy, the tragedy which is based on the life of women, particularly or basically it is seen that in tragedies, the main figure, the central figure always remains the men. But in she tragedy, in place of man, women is the central figure of the drama. The tragedy which is written by keeping the women figure, female figure at the center of the drama, that type of drama, that type of tragedy is called as the she tragedy. It has been made popular by Rowe. In this particular kind of tragedy, central figure is female one. At the same time, all the play, complete action of the play revolves around the exploits of the women, exploits of that central female character. And the famous example of this particular kind of tragedy is St. John, written by George Bernard Shaw. Next and the last type of tragedy, according to the theme, is domestic tragedy. As the name implies, domestic, which is related with the domestic life, which is related with the life of the common people, life of the middle class people, that type of tragedy is called as the domestic tragedy. This type of tragedy was evolved during the 18th century. It became extremely popular during the 19th century, and domestic tragedy was based on the middle class life, problems of middle class life, tensions of middle class life, day-to-day life of the common people, and based on their problems, based on their tensions, if the play or if the tragedy is written, that type of drama, that type of tragedy is called as the domestic tragedy. And famous examples are Justice, written by Galsworthy, and London Merchant, written by George Lillo. So now we have seen all the four subtypes of the tragedy according to the theme. Before we, what we can say, conclude the topic, once again we will take a recap of all the things which we have seen or gone through in the lecture. We were studying the topic, types, kinds, division, forms, and classification of tragedy according to what we can say various types. So first of all, I can say that tragedy can be divided according to two types. It can be divided according to theme, according to form or structure. It can be divided according to theme. According to form or structure, the tragedy is further divided under two subtypes. The first one is the classical tragedy. Second one is the romantic tragedy. According to the theme or subject matter, it is further divided under four subtypes. The first one is the horror tragedy. Second one is the heroic tragedy. Third one is the she tragedy. Fourth one is the domestic tragedy. When we think about the classical tragedy is the kind of drama which is written according to the rules and conventions which are laid down by Aristotle and other great Greek masters. So what are these rules? What are these conventions? In simple words, we can say that the tragedy which follows the theory of three unities, the tragedy which employs the chorus, that type of drama, that type of tragedy can be called as the classical tragedy. So what are the three unities? Three unities are unity of time, unity of action, unity of place. And these three unities are noticeable, are told by Aristotle in his famous book Poetics. Initially or basically, Aristotle speaks about only two unities. In the book, he discusses two unities in the book. The first one is the unity of time and unity of action. The unity of place is itself implied by Aristotle in the unity of time. So what does unity of time says that? Unity of time says that tragedy must confine itself to the single revolution of the sun. Then what does unity of action says that? The plot of the play should be either purely comic or either purely tragic. There should not be blend of tragic and comic action into the same plot. If at all the dramatist is going to write the tragedy, the plot should be purely tragic. If at all the dramatist is going to write the comedy, the plot should be purely comic. And another important thing for unity of action is that no subplot unconnected with main plot should be introduced by dramatist into the drama. Third one is the unity of place. What does unity of place says? Plot of the play should remain honest with one single place and there should not be frequent changes in the place. So these are the three unities. And another important thing for the classical drama, classical tragedy is that it should use the chorus. There are three important purposes of using the chorus. The first one is that it reports the events, those have already happened in the play. Second thing that chorus does is it gives narration of those events which are not possible to be shown on the stage or to be presented on the stage. It may contain certain what we can say disastrous incidents like flood, fire, then the violent physical actions. And thirdly, it deepens the moral teaching of the play and sends the audience home with the firm belief in God. And we can say that the many famous classical writers have created immortal classical dramas. And in English, the famous example is Samson Agonist, written by John Milton. Another important type, according to the form and structure, is romantic tragedy. It is completely opposite to the classical tragedy because it does not have any set pattern. It freely violates three unities. It does not, what we can say, uses those unities. It does not employs or uses the chorus. At the same time, plot of the romantic tragedy is completely a mixture of fine blend of tragic and comic actions. At the same time, introduces many physical violent actions on the stage. And the writers of the romantic tragedy believes that they write their play according to the popular taste of the audience. And this particular type of tragedy was first of all written in English by Marlowe. Dr. Foster's is famous example. And then it has made extremely popular by the greatest dramatist of English, William Shakespeare. And all the tragedies written by William Shakespeare are written by following the structure of the romantic tragedy. And then when we come to the divisions of comedy according to the theme or subject matter, we can say that it is categorized under four subtypes: horror tragedy, heroic tragedy, she tragedy, and domestic tragedy. So when we think about horror tragedy is a drama or tragedy which is filled with many scenes of violence, bloodshed, revenge, murder, and all those things. And the famous example is Duchess of Malfi, written by John Webster. The heroic tragedy is based on the exploits of some great hero, the great works done by some great hero. And this kind of tragedy has been made popular by Dryden and Otway. And famous example is Aurangzeb, written by John Dryden. The she tragedy, as the name implies, based on the life of some female character. The central character in this type of tragedy is women or the female character, and all the story of the tragedy revolves around that particular character. The famous example is St. John, written by George Bernard Shaw. And then the domestic tragedy, as the name implies, the tragedy which deals with the life and problems of the middle class life, that type of tragedy is called as the domestic tragedy. And the famous examples are Justice, written by John Galsworthy, and London Merchant, written by Lillo. So these are the various kinds of, I can say that, various kinds of tragedy or the types of tragedy according to the form and structure and according to the theme. I hope